Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome you to this module of our EC training, upgrade training and basic training on the image of the child. I'd like to collaborate on you how the image of the child evolved and how it changed. And a part of this video will also feature on YouTube for those people who on one side want to becoming a little bit understand how we do our trainings. Online trainings, but also for those who want to gain some information but not really want to sign up for a program. We are providing the Early Childhood Teachers program for upgrade training, for the so-called in India Montessori Teachers training, which is a nursery program for educators, and also for the parents who may do some homeschooling or who want to look into understanding more the child from an educational perspective. So I'd like to take you on a kind of a history, we would say. So let's see, when we speak about the image of the child, what is the history behind? Before the modern era of the image of the child, what was there? And for a long time, a child or the children were seen as empty vessels which adults had to fill. So it was kind of a looking down to children. The childhood as we understand it today was not yet defined, and still till today we have to say that there are some areas in some continents where maybe children still are seen in that way. So it is also that education adjusts very slowly to a modern approach, and this is also why it takes time to really implement new thoughts and ideas into the early years and the early childhood education. So at that time, it was kind of this, that the adult had the feeling that the child doesn't know anything, it doesn't know how to behave, it has no understanding of moral values, and the adult is the one who knows. So I'm higher than you. It was a hierarchical approach where it was more like a little bit of looking down on the child also. And the teacher saw itself in the position, sometimes also parents saw itself in the position to say, okay, I am needed for you to create a proper life. What was not really understood at that time, there are many things which were not understood, but one thing is that we want to point out is that at that time, of course, evolution was very different. So the processes were way slower, we can say, because today when you think back 20 years from now, think about it, it was very different. Like, for example, here in Europe, when I'm just now sitting here in Vienna in Austria, Europe, 20 years from now, the population of Austria and entire Europe was very different, because globalization started in this process of the last 10-15 years. So now we have a very different emerging of the different kind of traditions, cultures, and religions, which didn't exist 20 years back. So if we educated 20 years back children on a certain structure of how life should be, because with other people comes other behaviors, so then they will not be really prepared to deal with that. So that actually causes one of the big problems, besides, of course, the looking down of the child, that when we educate children according to what we understand of the world as of today, they will never be able to sustain their life in the future. This is not what we can do. So we cannot see the child as an empty vessel that we have to fill up, because we don't know what the future brings. We actually don't know what the child needs, because education is a part of raising the child, cultivating the child, but also assisting the child to get an understanding of how we live in this world together. So some things might not really work out anymore. For a long time, it was also like this, that the adults or the children were understood as uneducated who needs to be educated by an adult. So that was a process for a very long time. This is why education, the main point of education, was always focusing on cognitive development, means on understanding, on speaking, on reading, on writing, on math, on science, all of that. So this is how the child becomes educated to understand the world. So an educated person at that time was a person who knew a lot, a person who had a basic knowledge, who had a broad knowledge about the understanding of the world. But that is something that we also changed nowadays, because education, the main point of education is not to educate children to know, but more to be able to have tools and skills available to live. Then also at that time, they were divided between stupid and smart, or well-behaving and wicked. What does this know? So in the 19th century, it was more like this, that adults, parents and educators and teachers saw the child, oh, this is a smart child. So that was something like a stamp, and you have been smart, and whatever you did, you have been smart, you will make it. And if you had the stamp of being stupid, then no one really cared for you anymore, also for your education, because anyhow you're stupid, you can't make it. So the understanding of the brain development was very different. Then also children were a lot measured by their behavior. So well-behaving, wicked, yeah, this is a child I don't want to have around because it's not behaving. And the way how behavior was established was very different, because there was this understanding that if a child is not behaving, yeah, I have to train it on it. I have to really train it. So that is some kind of understanding that was there. In the 19th century, or till the beginning of the 20th century, adults also understood the wrong behavior as a provocation towards them. So that was also for a very long time. If a 2 or 3-year-old child did something wrong, then the adult understood it as a provocation. This child is doing it to provoke my emotions or whatever. So it was a personal thing. So it means that there was this understanding, or this viewpoint, that the child should know how to do it at the age of 2 or 3 already, or 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 or 10. They should already actually be like adults, just in a small body. And so this was one of the major changes that happened in the 20th century, what we call the century of the child, where things changed and we slowly got more knowledge, more understanding also. And there were many different views on the children, starting at the beginning of the 20th century. The child for the first time was observed very differently, and it was understood that childhood and adulthood is a very different phase in life. And this understanding came mainly by the influence of psychologists and modern educators. And so there are some names that we'd like to name to you at a later point, also which influenced that 20th century understanding a lot. Before we go now, what image means, it is also really important to understand that when a new concept is introduced in education, it's not like this, that all of the educators, parents and teachers say, wow, we have something new, we must have it. It's like, you know, with the smartphone, it's like that. When a new smartphone comes, a new feature, a better camera, everyone wants to have it. But with education, it's very different. So for education, for a new idea in education to create a change, it takes a long time. So when we see today the advancements in education, finally the change taking place, and this video is recorded now in May 2020, where we have a very different view on the child, an image of the child, which we'll introduce to a little later, then we can say this was a evolvement and a development of 100 to 120, 150 years. And if we calculate even Pestalozzi and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, it was a 200-year period that brought us here. So it's not fast. It's really very slow, and many things are in how would we say, many things are tried in between, and then they are put aside again because maybe the structures are not right. And so it takes a lot of understanding of this on the side of the one who is the educator to really provide the child the needed part and to adjust to the ideas of modern education, because still today there are so many educators, teachers and parents out there which are actually not yet understanding the change that already happened in the curriculums, at least in many curriculums of many countries and continents even, and they are still not yet there to really live that. So to live up to this curriculum. By the way, I just would like to make a note here. We speak in our trainings always about educators, because this also includes all of the different areas, teachers, educators, and parents. So what does image of child mean? So it is in general a phrase which is used by educators, and it includes how we see the child. This refers to the society or a group of people, or even to an individual. So how does the society see the child? That creates the image of the child. How does a group of people see the child? That creates the image of a child. How does an individual see the child? That creates an image of the child. So if we go to Waldorf, Rudolf Steiner, methodology and idea of pedagogy, then the group of educators and parents who are working according to Rudolf Steiner have a very clear image of the child. If you go in a Reggio kindergarten, then you have a very clear understanding of the image of the child. If you go in a Montessori kindergarten, you have a very clear understanding of a child. So if you go in a TLI Pedagogics kindergarten, you have a very clear understanding of the child. So there are many things which are actually really guiding along the way in regard to that there is a group or the society at all which sees the child in a certain way. So there are many different images of the child. Then it refers to the children's capabilities, development, purpose, and agency. It is influenced by social, cultural, and historical experiences, and it is held consciously or unconsciously. So consciously means that someone is regularly introspecting and reflecting on their image, and it changes or it adapts, or I know my image of a child, which may come from my childhood, from people I surrounded, my mentors who brought me up as an educator, who helped me to grow in this profession. And then unconsciously, those are belief systems, things which I'm not aware. Maybe I, as a child, observed certain things, heard certain things parents or other adults around said about me as a child, and this became also my image, a part of my image. So the more I reflect on the image, what I have, and especially you can see the image of a child very well. So I'm doing lots of consulting, and when I observe people, already when I observe the room, I can see. So like yesterday, Friday, I was in one of the preschools, and I went in. It was a Montessori inspired preschool. I went in, and they all have been gone already, so it was the end of the day, and there was the books were not in order laying there, and the kitchen to play was really not in order, and so everything was just kind of not in order. So what I immediately see is that the teachers are not able to live the image of the child which Montessori, Dr. Maria Montessori gives. So this is when you know the pedagogy and you know the philosophy and the idea of how this educationalist who created that pedagogy, how they view the child. And then you go into a school, into a preschool, nursery, toddler, playground, whatever, and you see how the educators live it. Then you start understanding how well they are able to adjust to that image or not. So, what does image of the child else mean? According to what the child symbolizes for us, we will treat the child. According to our view on childhood, we will educate children. Very important to understand. It is important that educators align their image of the child with modern education. There are national curriculums in all of the countries. I don't know any country who does not have a national curriculum. A national curriculum is a guideline for educators and teachers how and what kind of education in that country should happen. And when you look at the image of the child, what do they say about what is a child? How shall we as educators see the child, view the child? Then you will see that in all of them, I compared so many, in all of them there's one main information, what they want us as educators, as teachers, and parents can take it on also, how to see the child. And the educator working in an educational institution, his or her job is to live up to that curriculum. So we have to correct our own views on childhood, on the child. We have to reflect on our image that we have. We have to reread our texts, what we write, and see what wording do we use, how do we address the child, because this will show a lot about our image. So we have to grow up to live the image of a child, which is our duty to do as an educator in a national curriculum that we follow. It is important that educators reflect on their image of the child. Really, really important. So educators make decisions according to their image of the child. What does this mean? Why is it so important that we reflect on our image of the child? Our decisions will be made according to the image of the child. So if I see a conflict between two children, the question is, what is the image of my child? Is the image that I trust them, that they are able to solve it themselves? Is my image that I need to nurture them and help them to solve it? Is my view on a conflict of children that they are just stupid and they again can't get along? Yeah, very different. Can you feel? It's a different kind of energy. It's a different kind of what and how I will approach the child. Yeah. If I prepare my activities for the children and I have an image of the child that children are enthusiastic, curious beings who want to engage and be a part of it, my activities will be prepared very differently than if I have the image that I have to train them to get them ready for school, to do this, to do that. Very different. I can prepare the same ideas, but my approach, how I will work it out, will be very different to what the other person is doing with the other image. So this is why it's so important.